when the accusation and the truth. I had always known that my marriage to Richard was far from perfect, but I never anticipated the turn it would take one fateful evening. It was a quiet Sunday, and the sun had just begun to set, casting a golden glow through the kitchen windows. I was in the middle of preparing dinner, lost in the rhythm of chopping vegetables, when I heard the door slam shut. The sudden noise jolted me, and I instinctively glanced at the clock. It was early for Richard to be home. Before I could even process the thought, I heard voices, angry, raised voices. Richard's sister Emily had come over unannounced again. Her visits had become more frequent, and each time they brought tension and unease into our home. Emily had never been subtle about her disapproval of me. From the moment Richard and I began dating, she had made it clear that she didn't think I was good enough for her brother. But tonight, the atmosphere felt different, charged with something more than just the usual disdain. I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel and stepped out to the living room, where the voices were growing louder. Emily was pacing, her hands gesturing wildly as she spoke, while Richard stood with his back to me, arms crossed tightly over his chest. My heart sank at the sight of them together, clearly united in whatever grievance they had brought to my doorstep. "Is everything okay?" I asked, my voice wavering slightly as I tried to keep the anxiety out of it. Emily stopped pacing and turned to face me, her eyes narrowing. "No, everything is not okay, and you know it," she snapped, her voice sharp and accusatory. I looked to Richard for some kind of explanation, but he remained silent, his expression hard. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Something was terribly wrong. "Richard, what's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, despite the dread curling in my stomach. He finally turned to face me, his eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't quite place. Disappointment? Anger? Whatever it was directed at me, and it cut deeper than I could have imagined. "Emily and I have been talking," Richard began, his tone cold and distant, "and we've come to a realization." I waited, my heart pounding in my chest, as he hesitated, as if searching for the right words to deliver the blow. When they came, they were sharper and more hurtful than anything I could have prepared for. "You've only married me for my money." The accusation hung in the air like a thick fog, suffocating the room. I stared at Richard in disbelief, my mind struggling to comprehend the words he had just uttered. "What are you talking about?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Emily stepped forward, her expression one of triumph as she delivered the final blow. "It's obvious, really. You were struggling financially before you met Richard, barely getting by. Then suddenly, you're living in this beautiful home, enjoying all the luxuries he provides. You've been playing the role of the loving wife, but it's clear you're just after his wealth." The words stung like a slap across the face. I could feel the air leave my lungs as I tried to process what she was saying. Yes, I had been in a difficult financial situation before I met Richard, but that was never the reason I fell in love with him. Our connection had been real, or so I had believed. We had shared dreams, laughed together, cried together. How could everything be reduced to such a shallow accusation? "Richard," I whispered, turning my gaze back to my husband, "how could you think that?" He looked away, avoiding my gaze as if he were ashamed of what he had just said. But the damage was already done. "I don't know anymore," he muttered, his voice filled with doubt. It makes sense." I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, threatening to spill over. "You think I married you for money? What about all the times I supported you when your business was struggling? What about the nights I stayed up with you, helping you plan, comforting you when you were on the verge of giving up? I was there for you, Richard, not because of your money, but because I loved you." Emily scoffed, rolling her eyes in mockery. "Convenient how you only mentioned the times you helped him. What about the expensive vacations, the shopping sprees, the new car? You've been living the high life on his dime." The anger that had been simmering beneath my pain now began to boil over. Those were things Richard insisted on. I never asked for any of it. I've never been one to care about material things, and you know that, Richard. Or at least, I thought you did. But he still wouldn't look at me. I could see the doubt etched into his features, the seed that Emily had planted now fully taking root. My heart broke as I realized that he had already made up his mind, that he had allowed his sister's words to poison his trust in me. "Richard," I pleaded, taking a step closer to him. "I married you because I loved you. I've never cared about your money. If you truly believe that I'm with you for your wealth, then maybe you never really knew me at all." He finally looked at me, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of regret in his eyes, but it was fleeting, and his expression quickly hardened again. The silence between us stretched, heavy and oppressive, until Emily broke it with a smirk of satisfaction. "Maybe it's time you left then," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "If you're not here for the money, there's no reason to stay, right?" I looked at Richard one last time, hoping for a sign, any sign, that he still believed in us, that he still believed in me. But all I saw was a man who had lost his way, who had allowed doubt and fear to cloud his judgment. My heart ached with the realization that the man I had once loved so deeply was now a stranger to me. With a heavy heart, I turned and walked out of the kitchen, out of the house that had once been my home. As I left, I could feel Emily's eyes on my back, and I knew she was relishing her victory. I didn't stop until I was in my car, the door shut behind me, and the silence of the night surrounding me. It was only then that the tears I had been holding back finally broke free, streaming down my face in a torrent of pain and betrayal. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to steady myself, but the sobs racked my body with a force I couldn't control. How had it come to this? I had always known that my relationship with Richard was far from perfect, that there were challenges we would have to face together. But I had never imagined that our love would be tested in this way, that the trust we had built would be so easily shattered by a single accusation. As I drove away, my mind raced with memories of our time together. I thought about the day we met, how Richard had made me laugh with his quick wit and charm. I thought about the long nights we spent talking about our hopes and dreams, the plans we had made for our future. I thought about the times I had stood by his side, supporting him through the ups and downs of his business, offering my love and encouragement when he needed it most. And now, all of that was gone, reduced to nothing more than a cruel accusation, a baseless claim that I had married him for his money. It was a betrayal that cut deeper than anything I had ever experienced, and I wasn't sure how I would ever recover from it. Days turned into weeks, and the pain of that night began to dull. Though it never truly went away, I found solace in my work, throwing myself into projects and tasks that kept my mind occupied. But the emptiness in my heart remained, a constant reminder of what I had lost. It was during one of those long, lonely evenings that I received a call from Richard. I had almost forgotten the sound of his voice, and hearing it now, filled with uncertainty and regret, stirred emotions I had tried so hard to bury. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "Please, I need to see you." Part of me wanted to hang up the phone, to protect myself from any further hurt. But another part of me, the part that still remembered the love we had once shared, agreed to meet him. I wasn't sure what I hoped to gain from the conversation, but I knew that I needed closure, one way or another. We met at a small cafe that we used to frequent when we first started dating. It was a place filled with happy memories, and the sight of it now brought a lump to my throat. Richard was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a cup of coffee in front of him. He looked up as I approached, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and guilt. "Thank you for coming," he said, standing up as I reached the table. I nodded, taking a seat across from him. "What do you want to talk about?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, about what happened, about what I said, and I realize now that I was wrong. I let Emily's words get into my head, and I doubted you when I should have trusted you. I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. I've spoken to some of our mutual friends," he went on, "and they reminded me of all the times you've been there for me, all the ways you've supported me. They told me about the sacrifices you've made, the things you've done to help me succeed. I realized that I had been blind, that I had let my own insecurities and fears cloud my judgment." He paused, his eyes searching mine for any sign of forgiveness. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I should have trusted you. I should have known that you were with me for the right reasons." The sincerity in his voice was undeniable, and for a moment I felt a flicker of hope, but it was quickly extinguished by the memory of the hurt and betrayal I had endured. "Richard," I began, choosing my words carefully, "I loved you. I gave everything I had to our relationship, but love can't survive without trust. And when you doubted me, when you let someone else's words come between us, you broke that trust. That's something I can't forget." He looked down at his hands, clearly struggling with the weight of my words. "I know," he whispered. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. I wanted you to know that I still care about you." I sighed, feeling a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and a lingering sense of loss. "I need to move on, Richard," I told him gently. "I hope you can find happiness, but it won't be with me." He nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. "I understand. I wish things could have been different." "So do I," I replied, standing up to leave. "Take care of yourself, Richard." As I walked out of the cafe, I felt a strange sense of relief. It wasn't the closure I had expected, but it was closure nonetheless. I had said my piece, and now it was time to move forward, to heal from the wounds of the past. The days that followed were difficult, but I slowly began to rebuild my life. I focused on my career, on the friendships that had sustained me through the toughest times. I rediscovered my passions, the things that brought me joy and fulfillment. And in time, the pain of Richard's betrayal began to fade, replaced by a newfound strength and resilience. I realized that I didn't need Richard's money. I never did. What I needed was love, trust, and respect, things that no amount of wealth could ever buy. And as I continued on my journey, I knew that I would find them again, on my own terms. Because in the end, it wasn't about the money. It was about the choices we make, the people we choose to trust, and the life we build for ourselves. And I was determined to build a life filled with love and honesty, a life that was truly mine. This is a story about a woman who faces a deep betrayal from her husband and sister-in-law. The plot centers around an accusation that she married her husband for his wealth. The narrative unfolds as her husband, influenced by his sister, begins to doubt her intentions, leading to a confrontation where she is accused of being a gold digger. Despite her attempts to remind her husband of the love and support she's given him over the years, he allows his sister's words to poison his trust in her. Feeling heartbroken and betrayed, the woman decides to leave, realizing that their relationship cannot survive without trust. As time passes, the husband comes to regret his actions and seeks forgiveness, acknowledging that he let his insecurities and his sister's influence cloud his judgment. However, the damage is already done, and the woman realizes that she deserves more than a relationship built on doubt. She decides to move on, embracing her independence and self-worth, understanding that true love cannot exist without trust and respect. The story explores themes of trust, betrayal, self-worth, and the importance of integrity in relationships. It is a tale of heartbreak, but also of empowerment, as the protagonist chooses to walk away from a toxic situation and rebuild her life on her own terms,